There are structures in our world that compel modern humanity, with all its technological might, to fall silent. Ancient methods of construction, shrouded in mystery, give rise to a cascade of questions to which mainstream science offers answers that seem, at first, deceptively simple. In recent times, one theory has gained particular traction: an explanation for how ancient masters cleaved mountains. The method, made popular through compelling demonstrations, is one of brute force and simple physics. A series of metal wedges driven into bedrock. Historians have embraced this technique, presenting it as a panacea, a universal solution to the inconvenient questions of ancient stonework. And indeed, the method appears both logical and effective. But is it truly universal? Was this the technique used to fashion the most grandiose monuments of the past? To find the answer, we must turn to the most staggering and inexplicable example of all: the megalithic complex of Baalbek. It is the largest known structure ever built with Cyclopean stone blocks. Official scholarship holds that it was erected around the 1st century AD, periodically expanded and rebuilt by civilizations including the Romans. Yet, this dating raises far too many questions to be accepted on faith alone. And as our investigation unfolds, the reasons for this doubt will become clear. Let us set aside our preconceptions and examine, in detail, the official view of how this impossible masterpiece was created. The process begins with the most fundamental challenge. How were these colossal blocks, some weighing over 1,000 tons, quarried from the earth? Mainstream history provides an explanation, but we must ask if this version can withstand a collision with reality, the reality of Baalbek itself. Let us dissect this method of splitting stone, so often offered as the definitive answer. According to the theory, the process began with a meticulous analysis of the raw stone. Ancient stonemasons would have had to locate a natural plane within the rock mass, a line of least resistance along which the stone would willingly fracture. Then, along a predetermined line, holes of a precise diameter and depth were drilled at calculated intervals, their dimensions dictated by the size and structure of the stone. Into these cavities, special metal wedges were inserted, often paired with 2 shims to evenly distribute the immense pressure. Workers would then begin the methodical, rhythmic work of driving the wedges, striking them in sequence. This synchronized and uniform increase in force would build a colossal tension deep within the stone, a tension that would ultimately culminate in a single, clean fracture, cleaving the block along the designated line. The theory is elegant, a testament to human ingenuity. It presents a world of simple tools and immense labor, a comforting narrative of incremental progress. But when we stand before the impossible scale of the ancients, we are forced to wonder if such explanations truly capture their ambition, or if they are simply the stories we tell ourselves to make their achievements seem a little less divine. In theory, the method is one of elegant simplicity. On paper, and in small-scale experiments, it appears entirely logical. But this theory shatters against the brutal reality of scaling up. From splitting a single isolated boulder to the task of extracting a monolithic giant from the heart of a mountain. To fracture a stone already freed is one challenge. To quarry it from living rock is another entirely. The block must be isolated not along a single plane, but a minimum of 4, each executed with breathtaking precision to achieve a perfect rectangular prism. And even this is not the greatest challenge. Before any splitting can begin, the block must first be severed from the main rock mass beneath it. The theory of the wedges offers no answer to how this foundational cut was made. If we assume the ancient builders somehow achieved this, their crude method would have inevitably scarred the landscape. we would expect to find uneven, fractured surfaces in the quarry. We would see the telltale remnants of boreholes, the very slots for the wedges, pocking both the megalith and the motherstone from which it was born. After such a violent birth, the block would require immense labor to shape and finish, grinding away vast quantities of stone to erase the trauma of its creation. But when we turn to the quarries of Baalbek, located only a few hundred meters from the temple complex, we are confronted by a scene that utterly contradicts this convenient narrative. Here, left behind in the bedrock, are vast, geometrically perfect voids where the megaliths once rested. The walls of these immense sockets are astonishingly flat and smooth, meeting in crisp, nearly flawless internal angles. There are no traces of drilling, no jagged edges from percussive splitting. The impression is inescapable that unknown builders wielded a gigantic instrument, one that allowed them to excise blocks from the bedrock with surgical precision, as if carving butter from a block. The most famous of these unfinished giants, the monolith known as the Stone of the South, lies still partially tethered to the earth. Its size and weight are staggering, but the technology of its shaping is what truly confounds. We see clean, linear cuts, incisions that defy any explanation involving the primitive force of hammered wedges. Furthermore, on the megaliths already set in the temple walls, and on those still resting in the quarry, there are strange apertures of an unknown function, wholly unlike the technological boreholes required for wedges. Perhaps they were for lifting mechanisms, or some form of fastening. Their true purpose remains a mystery. Thus, at the very first step, the quarrying of the material, the official story encounters insurmountable contradictions. The facts we can see and touch in the stone of Baalbek do not simply fail to confirm the theory of wedge-splitting. They actively and profoundly refute it. The method by which these colossal blocks were liberated from the mountain remains utterly unknown, leaving the very foundation of this ancient wonder a profound and unsettling enigma. The evidence suggests a level of technological sophistication far exceeding the one we are asked to imagine. If the very act of quarrying the stone is shrouded in an enigma that challenges our understanding of ancient capabilities, then the next stage of the journey, the transportation of these multi-ton behemoths, presents a near impenetrable paradox. Let us assume for a moment that by some fantastic means, the ancient builders did succeed in carving perfectly smooth blocks, weighing 1,000 tons or more from the living rock. A new problem now confronts them, one that seems utterly unsolvable with the technologies we attribute to them. How to deliver these monoliths from the quarry to the construction site. The distance, though relatively short at approximately 1 kilometer, transforms into an insurmountable obstacle when dealing with such masses. The most common hypothesis offered by proponents of the conventional narrative involves a system of rollers and sheer human force. We are presented with a vision of thousands of laborers, muscles straining, pulling on thick ropes to move a giant block that inches forward over a bed of rolling wooden logs or stone cylinders. This theory sounds plausible when discussing blocks weighing 20, 30, or even 50 tons. Indeed, similar methods have been used throughout history, and their effectiveness for moderate loads is proven. But the entire logic of this system collapses the moment the cargo surpasses a critical threshold, reaching the monstrous weights of 800 or 1,000 tons, as is the case with the megaliths of Baalbek, known as the trilithon. Let us analyze this idea through the unforgiving lens of elementary physics and material science. Wooden rollers, even those hewn from the strongest species of timber, would simply be crushed into splinters under the pressure of a 1,000-ton load. The contact area of each roller with the block above and the ground below is incredibly small, meaning the pressure at that point would be astronomical. No wood could withstand such a force. Very well, some might say. But what if the rollers were made of stone? This only exacerbates the problem. First, stone rollers would themselves possess an enormous weight, which must be added to the weight of the block itself, a dead mass making an impossible task even harder. Second, stone is a brittle material. Under such colossal point pressure, any stone roller, whether granite or basalt, would almost certainly fracture. And we cannot forget the surface over which this entire apparatus was meant to travel. Moving such a load would require a perfectly level and incredibly durable road, one capable of withstanding pressures comparable to the treads of a modern battle tank, but concentrated on a much smaller area. Any imperfection, any soft patch of ground would have led to catastrophe. And the unsettling questions do not end there. Even if, by some miracle, they had found a material for rollers capable of bearing such an impossible weight, a far greater problem immediately presents itself: the question of motive force. What rope, what cable woven from mere plant fiber could possibly endure the strain required to shift a mass of 1,000 tons from a dead stop? To overcome the colossal inertia and the drag of friction, any such line would have simply disintegrated. And what of the power to pull it? How many thousands of laborers would be required, and how, in a pre-industrial age, could their simultaneous effort ever be synchronized? It is a logistical problem that appears utterly insurmountable. And yet, this journey across the ground is merely the prelude. The true challenge was not simply to deliver the block to the foot of the temple. It had to be raised, lifted to a height of approximately 8 meters, and set into the foundation with breathtaking precision, ensuring a perfect seal against its neighbors. Here, the theory of simple ropes and rollers dissolves into absurdity. The popular explanation, a giant earthen ramp, also crumbles under scrutiny. To haul a 1,000-ton block to such a height, the ramp's angle of incline would have to be minimal. Any steeper, and the force of gravity pulling the block back down the slope would become an unconquerable enemy. This dictates a ramp stretching for hundreds of meters, its volume comprising millions of cubic meters of earth, a construction project in its own right, rivaling the scale of the temple itself. And when the work was done, where did this colossal structure go? Not a single trace of it remains. None of the proposed technologies, not rollers, not ropes, not earthen ramps, can provide a coherent answer for how the megaliths of Baalbek were not only moved, but raised. The scale of the task extends far beyond the known limits of manual labor and primitive mechanisms. We are speaking of masses so immense, their handling presents a formidable challenge even today. To fully grasp the engineering puzzle, we must compare it directly to the capabilities of modern construction. In our 21st century, an age of steel, hydraulics, and computer control, the workhorse of any major building site is the mobile crane. The standard lifting capacity of these ubiquitous machines is around 50 tons. This is more than sufficient for the overwhelming majority of our operations, hoisting concrete slabs, steel structures, and heavy equipment. It is a proven, efficient, and economically sound technology. 50 tons. The builders of Baalbek worked with monoliths 20 times that weight. It forces us to confront a humbling reality, that in our quest to understand the past, we may have fundamentally misjudged not only their capabilities, but also our own place on the long arc of history. In certain specialized cases, the construction of bridges, industrial facilities, or the installation of heavy turbines, more powerful cranes are brought to bear, capable of lifting up to 200 tons. This is serious, costly machinery, demanding special preparation, reinforced sites, and highly qualified personnel. For most construction firms, these cranes represent the absolute limit, their use dictated only by extreme necessity. But even these formidable machines pale in comparison to the tasks that confronted the builders of the ancient world. Do cranes exist today, capable of lifting 1,000 tons? Yes, they do. But they are not production line equipment. They are true exclusives, bespoke creations from a handful of global Corp. 1, or the giant DMAG crawler cranes can operate with loads of 1,200, even in excess of 2,000 tons. However, their deployment is fraught with colossal difficulties. These machines are incredibly expensive, both to manufacture and to operate. Their sheer size and weight make their delivery to a work site a logistical nightmare in itself. And most critically, they can only achieve their maximum lifting capacity at a minimal boom radius, when the load is practically at the crane's own feet. The farther the load must be moved, or the higher it must be raised, the more dramatically the permissible weight plummets. To operate such a giant requires a perfectly prepared, solid, and level platform, capable of withstanding monstrous pressure. Often, special concrete foundations must be poured just to support the machine that will do the work. If the ground is not firm enough, crawler cranes can distribute the weight over a larger area, but they too have their limits. And here, we face a stunning paradox. Possessing all our modern knowledge, technology, and materials, we overwhelmingly choose to design and build in a way that avoids the need for such super-heavy machinery. Our construction industry is founded on principles of modularity, standardization, and economic efficiency. We do not carve 1,000-ton blocks from the bedrock. We cast reinforced concrete in manageable sections, easily assembled by standard cranes. We seek the simple, rational path. The ancients, according to the official narrative, followed a completely different course. Possessing supposedly nothing but copper chisels, fiber ropes, and muscle, they consciously set for themselves tasks that today would demand the most powerful, rare, and expensive mechanisms on the planet. They did not search for the easy way. They chose the monumental, the impossibly heavy, the path of greatest resistance, leaving us to wonder not just how they did it, but why they would even dare to try. They chose to build with monoliths of a weight that leaves modern engineers in silent, reverent awe. It is a logic turned on its head, a supposedly primitive society undertaking projects that our own high-technology civilization deems extraordinarily complex, if not economically impossible. This presents a stark choice. Either we're looking at evidence of some incredible, lost knowledge, or we are witnessing the complete failure of conventional theory to explain the inexplicable with primitive means. If the task of moving the horizontal 1,000-ton blocks of the trilithon already pushes the boundaries of our belief, then the columns of the Temple of Jupiter in Baalbek transport us to another reality altogether. Here, the laws of engineering, as we understand them, seem to cease to apply. Of the once majestic temple that must have staggered the imagination of its contemporaries, only 6 columns survive. But even this small remnant of a forgotten magnificence serves as irrefutable proof of a technology lost to time. These 6 stone titans ascend toward the sky, reaching a height of 22 meters, the equivalent of a modern 7-story building. Their diameter is a staggering 7 meters, projecting an aura of absolute, immovable power. But the most mind-altering revelation comes when we calculate their weight. A simple estimate, based on volume and the density of stone, yields a figure the rational mind struggles to accept. Each column weighs nearly 1,500 tons. that is 50% heavier than the largest blocks of the famed trilithon lying in the foundation below. Yet unlike those foundation stones, these colossi were not simply quarried and laid flat. They had to be fashioned with breathtaking precision, transported, and then, in an act that borders on the impossible, raised vertically. Their surfaces are perfectly smooth, polished to a degree that speaks of the highest mastery of stonecraft. How could such form and finish be achieved on a 1,500-ton monolith? What tools could shape such an object, as if turned on a lathe of gargantuan proportions? Not a single artifact has ever been found that could even hint at the existence of such technology. And then comes the final, insurmountable challenge: the erection. To imagine lifting a 22-meter column weighing 1,500 tons into a perfect vertical alignment. Here, any theory involving ropes, ramps, and thousands of laborers is shattered against the unforgiving rock of reality. Such an operation demands more than brute force. It requires a phenomenal degree of control, coordination, and a level of engineering foresight that remains profoundly unaccounted for. These silent giants do more than defy the sky. They defy our narrative of the past. They stand not merely as ruins of a temple, but as a permanent challenge to our modern conceit, forcing us to question what we think we know about the limits of human achievement. The slightest whisper of an error, a moment of uneven tension, a single weakness in one link of the lifting mechanism, and a mass of 1,500 tons comes crashing down with a deafening roar, pulverizing everything in its path, entombing hundreds in an instant. The ancient builders were tasked not merely with raising this colossal weight, but with placing it to a precision of millimeters upon its prepared base, damaging neither the column nor its foundation. But as it would turn out, even this was not their limit. As if to utterly confound future generations, the creators of Baalbek layered a final, staggering challenge. Upon the summit of these 22-meter-high columns, they hoisted and set horizontal stone blocks, the architraves. Each section weighs approximately 80 tons. Today, to lift an 80-ton load to a height of 22 meters would require one of the world's most powerful mobile cranes, its telescopic boom extended to its maximum reach. It would be considered a complex and hazardous engineering operation. How did they do it? By what method were these multi-ton blocks raised to such a height, then settled gently atop the towering columns already in place? It is at this moment that the explanations offered by conventional science, of primitive yet effective methods, begin to seem not merely unconvincing, but wholly inadequate. They explain nothing. They only create an illusion of an answer. We are conditioned from childhood to accept a paradigm of linear progress, a simple upward march from the primitive to the complex. But Baalbek shatters this worldview. It demonstrates a level of construction technology that, in some aspects, surpasses even our own modern capabilities. When we step away from the doctrines imposed upon us in the classroom, we realize we are standing in the presence of a profound mystery. We have become so accustomed to the textbook versions of history that we fail to question them, accepting on faith what crumbles under the slightest practical scrutiny. But what if the truth is waiting not in our academic texts, but in the very sources we have been taught to dismiss as fiction, in the ancient legends and oral traditions of the world's peoples? When the logic of modern engineering reaches an impasse, when it fails to explain the phenomenon of Baalbek, only one path remains: to turn to the most ancient memories of humanity, recorded not in scientific treatises, but in myth and legend. What if we were to ask those whose ancestors have inhabited this land for millennia? Who, in their view, erected these mighty and impossible structures. It turns out the local Arab inhabitants have their own answers that diverge radically from the versions of official historians. They believe that Baalbek, in the deepest antiquity, belonged to the legendary king Nimrod, who once ruled these lands. He is a figure known from the biblical record as a mighty hunter and the builder of the Tower of Babel, a name forever associated with an epoch of giants and audacious ambition. Moreover, within a surviving ancient Arabic manuscript, it is written, "Within the very ruins of Baalbek, an ancient text was unearthed, containing a direct and startling claim about the complex's creators." The inscription speaks of a king Nimrod, who sent giants to rebuild Baalbek in the aftermath of the Great Flood. This single, short phrase upends our entire framework of history. First, it places the construction of Baalbek in an antediluvian age, making it vastly older than official scholarship dares to suggest. Second, it explicitly names the builders not as men of ordinary stature, but as giants, for whom the task of working with multi-ton blocks might have been a routine affair. The complex, then, was not merely built, but rebuilt after a global cataclysm, a fact that only deepens the mystery of its incredible age and resilience. These are not the only whispers from that forgotten time. Local lore also connects the construction of Baalbek to another biblical figure, Cain, the son of Adam. According to these legends, it was he who built the first fortified settlement here, a sanctuary of sorts, after being cursed by God. This version, too, pulls us back to the primordial dawn of human history, to an era when, according to the ancient texts, the world was an entirely different place. And while the stories of King Nimrod and Cain may seem to be mere mythological threads, they are astonishingly unified on one point. Baalbek is the creation of some ancient, powerful civilization, whose capabilities were incommensurate with our vision of a primitive past. Here we arrive at the essential question: what are we to believe? On one hand, we have the academic version, tens of thousands of slaves, who, with primitive tools, ropes, and rollers, somehow managed to quarry, transport, and perfectly place 1,000-ton megaliths. This theory, when held against the cold calculus of physics and engineering logic, begins to fracture. It asks us to believe in miracles of brute force, in a level of project management inconceivable even today, and in technologies that left behind not a single trace. On the other hand, we have the legends, the stories of giants. At first glance, it is pure fantasy, a tale for children. We are taught to interpret myth as allegory, not as a literal chronicle. But for a moment, let us discard this skepticism. Let us assume the builders were truly beings of immense size, 8, 10, or even 15 meters tall. The entire picture changes. For such a creature, a block weighing 800 tons would be the equivalent of an 80-kilogram concrete slab for a modern human. It is still heavy, but it is no longer impossible. The placement of these colossal bricks ceases to be an unsolvable puzzle and becomes a matter of routine construction, albeit one requiring significant effort. In this context, the legend of giants, as paradoxical as it sounds, emerges as a far more logical and plausible explanation for the phenomenon of Baalbek than the strained, contradictory vision of 75,000 slaves armed with simple chisels. We are left to wonder which requires the greater leap of faith: to believe in the myths our ancestors so carefully preserved, or to believe in a version of the past that defies the very laws of the world they built. Perhaps the truth is not that the stories are unbelievable, but that we have forgotten how to believe in the unbelievable. Legends whisper of an age when the world was ruled by giants. These narratives are often dismissed as the fanciful tales of our ancestors, allegories to explain the unexplainable. But what if they are not simply legends? What if they are the echoes of a forgotten reality? A memory preserved not in texts that can be misinterpreted, but in the very bedrock of the Earth. Across the planet, we are confronted with physical evidence that defies easy explanation. These are not artifacts that can be forged, nor scriptures that can be mistranslated. They are petrified footprints, direct impressions of colossal beings, left in a time so distant the stone itself was as soft and plastic as clay. These discoveries issue a profound challenge to the accepted story of our past, forcing us to look again at the ancient myths with new eyes. One of the most stunning examples lies in a place known as Dragon Park, just 400 kilometers from Vladivostok. There, upon a rock face, is a gigantic footprint, strikingly human in its form. The impression measures 1.5 meters from heel to toe. The foot is perfectly imprinted, its shape preserved in minute detail. This could only have occurred if a living creature stepped onto a surface that was once soft, which then hardened over untold ages, preserving the print for millions of years. Based on the proportions of the human body, simple calculations suggest the being that left this mark stood between 8 and 10 meters tall. This is not a tall human. This is a giant, ripped from the pages of legend and given form in stone. And this is far from an isolated incident. Reports of similar finds emerge from the most disparate corners of the world, suggesting that in a forgotten epoch, our planet may have been home to a race of titans. News portals have reported an entire series of giant footprints discovered in southwestern China's Guizhou province, near the village of Pingyan. In Russia, on Mount Polyud, local folklore has for centuries told of a footprint left by an ancient hero. The footprint is there, pressed into the rock, a physical testament to the tale. Even more astonishing is the discovery made by researcher Vyacheslav Plokov in Kazakhstan, near Lake Balkhash. He found not just a single track, but an entire series of them, and with them, the fossilized impressions of enormous teeth. These silent imprints in stone are more than geological curiosities. They are a direct challenge to our established timeline, a question mark etched into the very foundation of history. They force us to wonder what other truths lie dormant beneath our feet, what colossal figures once strode across these landscapes, leaving behind only whispers in folklore, and footprints, waiting for millennia to be found. A single footprint, etched into ancient stone. From its dimensions, a scientist would later conclude that the creature who left it could have stood an astonishing 60 feet tall. This is not an isolated anomaly. In the ensuing years, dozens of similar tracks would be unearthed in the same region, all left by colossal beings unknown to modern science. The pattern repeats across the globe. In the Tarija Valley of Bolivia, giant footprints have long been part of the local lore, attributed to mythical ancestors who once roamed the earth. The list is staggering, growing into the hundreds, with discoveries in nearly every nation, woven into the foundational myths of every people. And with each discovery comes a familiar echo, a local legend of giants who inhabited the land in a forgotten age. Official science, when it addresses these finds at all, tends to dismiss them as curious erosional patterns or freak geological formations. But when one is confronted with the clear impression of a foot, complete with 5 toes, a defined arch, and a heel, merely scaled up by a factor of 10, such explanations strain credulity. It is here that the disparate pieces of a global puzzle begin to lock into place. On one side, we have the enigma of Baalbek, a megalithic complex built with stone blocks so massive they defy the capabilities of any known primitive technology. On the other, we have hundreds of pieces of physical evidence scattered across the planet, suggesting the existence of a race of giants. The connecting thread is the universal human story. The ancient legends, the scriptures of the Bible and the Quran, the oral traditions of every culture on Earth, all speaking in one voice of a time when giants walked among us. Could the most logical explanation also be the simplest? Perhaps Baalbek was built by those very beings. For a people of such immense stature, maneuvering 1,000-ton blocks may have been as natural and routine as the laying of bricks is for us. This one hypothesis resolves, at a stroke, the technological paradoxes that have stumped modern science for centuries. But to assume these builders were merely large is to miss the greater implication. The legends do not describe simple brutes. They speak of beings who possessed knowledge and technologies beyond our comprehension. Ancient traditions, passed down orally for millennia, paint a picture of beings so far ahead of their time we are still unable to grasp their nature. Their so-called magic may have been nothing more than a form of advanced science, incomprehensible to the smaller peoples who witnessed it. In South America, tales still circulate of tall, fair-skinned giants who, according to ancient texts, dominated the continent for centuries. Their power was so absolute, it was said they had conquered the entire world. We are left to wonder if the great megalithic monuments that dot our planet are not testaments to the limits of our own ancestors' labor, but the casual artifacts of theirs. The evidence lies in plain sight, dismissed as geology or folklore. But perhaps the stones themselves are telling a different story, one that asks us to reconsider not only the history of our world, but our own place within it. Ancient lore tells of a reign that ended in cataclysm, a time when a mighty spirit descended from the heavens to shatter a race of white giants who, consumed by their own pride, had forgotten the ways of justice and mercy. Echoes of this story resonate across oceans, whispered among the indigenous tribes of North America. The Navajo, too, preserve legends of giants who walked the earth. A history passed from father to son, a tale of a regal race of titans who possessed an astonishing mastery of the deep earth. They required vast quantities of pure water, and to find it, they delved into the subterranean world, engineering wells of profound depth. But what is truly staggering in these accounts is how the water itself was said to rise to the brim, as if by an unseen force. Was this magic? Or was it an understanding of hydrological processes, the application of an ancient technology for lifting water that we have yet to rediscover? When we turn from oral tradition to physical evidence, to the monumental structures of Baalbek, a logical conclusion begins to surface. The sheer, gigantic stature of the builders is not, by itself, a sufficient explanation for their works. On the contrary, it only strengthens the supposition that they possessed something more, highly advanced tools, and a depth of knowledge that may, in fact, surpass our own. These ancient civilizations, whether the giants of legend or the unknown architects of Baalbek, possessed secrets we are only now beginning to unravel. Baalbek is not a mere collection of ancient stones. It is a living, monumental testament to a forgotten history of humanity. A monument to a civilization whose technological achievements still render our modern knowledge silent. It is a challenge to our every conception of the past, a call to rethink history and to admit that we know far less about. We stand on the threshold of a great discovery, and the key may lie in solving the mystery of Baalbek's ancient builders and the incredible, lost legacy they left behind.